Hey, what's happening? My name is D, and welcome back to another episode of Book Reviews with the Regular Dude. Today, we're going to be talking about Assistant to the Villain by Nicole Maehrer. Now, it's my understanding that this is like another book talk sensation type of book, kind of along the same lines as Light Lark and Fourth Wing. It's actually like from the same imprint as Fourth Wing. This imprint, I think, it's called Red Tower, and it's like the new adult sci-fi fantasy section or I guess arm of Entangled Publishing. I don't know anything about Entangled Publishing, but I my understanding is that their jam, their projects are just to be like, oh, it's young adult, but there's spice and you can say the F word or something. And I don't want to have this conversation, or this is not the video to have the conversation about how I think that new adult should be a more clearly defined genre, and I think there should be more substance to it than just young adult, but you can cuss and there's going to be sex scenes. Because I don't know, I just think that that's reductive at best. Now, like I said before, I think this is like a book talk sensation book and is like stupid popular already, but I've really only heard My Name is Marinez talk about it on TikTok. I watched like 10 to 30 seconds of her TikTok, then was like, my curiosity is piqued. So I said, I'm going to go read this, and then dipped. I know that My Name is Marinez has a review of this book herself, and you can go check that out as well. But I haven't watched it. We might agree. We might not agree. I have no idea. I tend to like, I think I have like, I kind of softball things compared to her because she's smarter than me. But if I intend to read a book, I don't watch like review videos on it because I don't want anyone's opinion to influence mine, and I don't want to like unintentionally bite someone's content, you know what I'm saying? Yeah, I want to cover this because it seems like a big chunk of my viewers like enjoy when I cover books like this. So I was like, all right, like, let me check it out. Let me get into this. So, watch this one, then go watch My Name is Marinez's one, and then I guess keep your eyes peeled for when Reads with Rachel gets her hands on it because she's going to have some good jokes. Yeah, I was scrolling TikTok. My Name is Marinez popped up on my FYP, started talking about this book, hit pause, went and read it, and do I regret that? No. Kind of. No. Yeah, no, I don't know. So apparently the premise of this book came from like a series of skits by the author saying like, oh, this is how I would conduct myself if I was the personal assistant to a morally gray villain in a fantasy novel or something. But speaking of the premise, let's read this bad boy. Once Upon a Time meets Office in Hannah Maher's laugh out loud viral TikTok series turned novel about the sunshine assistant to an evil villain and their unexpected romance. Assistant wanted. Notorious high-ranking villain seeks loyal, level-headed assistant for unspecified office duties, supporting staff for random mayhem, terror, and other dark things in general. Discretion a must. Excellent benefits. With ailing family to support, Evie Sage's employment status isn't just important, it's vital. So when a mishap with Rinadon's most infamous villain results in a job offer, naturally she says yes. No job is perfect, of course, but even less so when you develop a teeny crush on your terrifying, temperamental, and undeniably hot boss. Don't find evil so attractive, Evie. This is a quick aside, but that sort of like talking to yourself thing, the main character does that a lot, and I hated that. Just when she's getting used to severed head suspended from the ceiling and the odd squish of an errant eyeball beneath her heel, Evie suspects this dungeon has a huge rat, and not just the literal kind, because something rotten is growing in the kingdom of Renadon, and someone wants to take the villain and his entire nefarious empire out. Now Evie must not only resist drooling over her boss, but must also figure out exactly who is sabotaging his work and ensure he makes them pay. After all, a good job is hard to find. Okay, so first off, let's talk about that comp title. Once Upon a Time meets The Office is like good marketing because those are two really popular shows. They have a good reputation, promising something that the book fails to deliver. Maybe because those two shows, while they're like good, they have very distinctive voices, and those don't like go well together. Like this sort of like old-timey fairy tale Eurocentric fantasy vibe meets like modern contemporary workplace comedy just doesn't, it don't work. When I was reading this book, it felt almost like an attempt at like an R-rated parody of Tangled or Frozen or something. I think I'll get into this more later in the review, but yeah, I like the movie Tangled. Me and my wife watch it like maybe once a year. It's pretty funny, but that sort of fairy tale setting with that comedic style works better in Tangled. Even Frozen, I don't like Frozen at all. Or, hey, Shrek, Puss in Boots, like that kind of thing. I think it works better because the tone is consistent throughout any of those movies, I think. I've only seen like the first 2 Shrek movies and the 2 Puss in Boots movies. So if it falls apart in later Shrek movies, I have no idea. But the tone is consistent in the movies that I've seen, and they handle their themes like at all, which is good. And they like there's more to them. There's like substance to them, and I'll get more into this later. But I think that this book lacks that. Actually, no, I'm gonna talk about it now. This book has a lot of missed opportunities to like have some serious conversations and explore some serious themes. And it's like while it's doing this sort of goofy rom-com sort of thing that it's trying to do, it stumbles onto these themes and then regards them like they stepped in something nasty and just like ignores it. Except there is like a conversation that's had around like sexual assault, and I don't know if that was handled well, to be completely honest. And I just don't have the lived experience to really speak on that issue from that perspective. I know that it was given attention and it was regarded as serious, but I don't know like if it was enough, or if it was like while it was serious, maybe it wasn't tasteful, or the implications are not appropriate. I don't know because I don't have that lived experience or that expertise, so I don't want to speak on it too much. It made me feel like I was sad, like when they were talking about it. I was like, oh, it's fucked up, but like I don't know more than that. Okay, moving on to the 4 C's of this review. For those who don't know, the 4 C's are character, conflict, context, and craft. Okay, let's talk about characters. The main character is named Evangeline Sage. A lot of people just call her Evie. She calls herself Evie when she talks to herself. I don't really think we see a lot of different sides of her. She's not a very dynamic character. There's some depth to her. We spend most of the book like, in her head. So, she has some deep, dark thoughts, and we experience those. She's kind. She's scatterbrained. She's like millennial coded. She's awkward and clumsy, but super pretty and very thirsty. Like the main joke of the entire book, or the running gag of the entire book, is that she's sort of distracted by how hot the villain is. Like, yeah, he's a murderer, but damn, he fly. And the fact that he's so hot kind of makes everything that he does forgivable. And I feel kind of weird about how nonchalant or how casual she is about like all the murdering that this villain does, but then also condemns other characters who commit like gender-based violence, like against her, yeah. But still, it's like these people are so terrible, but he's fine and he's forgivable. And I guess it's because he's hot. And I don't necessarily want to have this discussion about which is worse, because in my opinion, both are horrible things to do, and people who do those things are not good people. But this isn't like an ethics or morals class. I don't want to like have that discussion. I just thought it was weird because these two are kind of inconsistent with each other within this person, and that's never really addressed. Evie definitely has an arc. I guess it's a corruption arc. It's not a hero's journey. It's a villain's journey, and she gets from like being sort of like nonchalant about all the violence that the villain commits to being like all about it and committing some violence herself by the end. As I was thinking about it, I realized that this protagonist might also be kind of a self-insert by the author, which I think is a trend with these books as well. So that's kind of like an aside, but that did just occur to me. So I don't know. That's another thing about this character, I guess, is that the other main character, the other point of view character we get is the villain, and the Kingdom of Rivendell just calls him the villain. Like, he doesn't get a villain name. And that was like, come on. At least try. Dr. Octopus, Dr. Evil. Like, they don't have to be good villain names, but give the villain a fucking name. You know what I'm saying? The Shadow Man, Mr. Destruction. There, you could have tried. I thought he was going to be like edgy Shadow Boy of this book, but you need a grumpy golden boy to be edgy Shadow Boy. So as far as the book goes, like, he's the villain because he's the villain, and he even seems to just have this notion of like, he has a backstory and I guess like a motivation for being the villain. But I always think it's kind of weird when villains revel in their own villainy. It's very Saturday morning cartoon. Like, I remember when I was little, there was this episode of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles from like, I think it was from the 80s. and the Shredder's doing some stuff, and he goes like, it feels so good to be so bad. And that's what this reminded me of a lot of the time, is somebody who is just doing these things because that's what he's supposed to, because he's the villain. And I don't find villains like that particularly compelling. I think that villains who have motivations and kind of see themselves as in the right, even if they know what they're doing is wrong, they stand on their convictions. And I don't see any convictions in this character. I don't see much of anything in this character. Like, this dude's so brooding. You don't really get to know him or whatever. Even when you're in his head, I guess he's a flat character. And I'm not sure if this was intentional, but I got the impression that this character is neurodivergent, or at least he's coded to be neurodivergent of some, like he has some neurodivergency. And I think that's a missed opportunity among many other missed opportunities in this book, to have some like good representation and a good conversation about how like neurodivergent people are villainized. But yeah, I don't find this character interesting or compelling. Like, even, you know, his whole deal is like, well, if they think I'm a villain, then I'll be a villain. And that's really boring to me. It's very Saturday morning cartoon to me, which I would expect a little more depth, like in a book that's meant for adults. Like, in giving him this backstory that is, like, admittedly pretty dark, there is an attempt to give him depth, but I just think that the attempt isn't successful. And the only other character that I want to bring up in this video is Becky, or Rebecca, the office rival. And I'm bringing her up because she's the only like non-white or white-coded character in this book. But she's cast into this role of office bitch. I fucking hate using that word, but that is like the role that she's been cast in. I tell my students this a lot, but there needs to be like intentionality in your writing. There needs to be reasons for writing things that you do. And I just want to know, like, what are the reasons for the only person of color being like the office bitch? Why is she so driven to succeed, I guess, under capitalism, sort of? And why is she so obsessed with everyone following the rules? Like, why is she controlling? These are all kind of like vicious stereotypes that are never like dispelled or challenged or even discussed, really. What we really learn about this character is that she has a grandma and she's not doing so good. And I don't know, it just didn't sit right with me that the only character of color, the only woman of color character, or the only character that's blatantly described as being a woman of color, is villainized more than the villain, who's, I guess, like this sexy white man. And if there's any Hannah Nicole Maehrer fans watching this, I'm not accusing her of anything. I'm just saying that this doesn't sit right with me. I just think it's a little sus. Let's move on to conflict. There is a lot of conflict in this book. Not a lot of it moves the plot, though. Evie has a lot of like internal conflict or anxiety about being able to care for her family. She's dealing with some grief and loss and trauma. Main conflict in the book is like that there's somebody sabotaging the villain's organization, and I didn't find this super intriguing or compelling. Like, it didn't grip me, it didn't intrigue me, and I'm not going to give away the twist of like who's sabotaging the villain or whatever, but I will say that I didn't see it coming. Like, it took, I got it a couple of pages before it was revealed or confirmed. And I felt dumb afterwards because, like, oh yeah, that was right there. And I will say, kind of like in Light Lark, the woman who the main character doesn't get along with well is sort of suspected a lot throughout the book, but it was less like, it didn't hit you over the head as much as it did in Light Lark. So credit is where credit's due, I guess. This book is sort of weird because the pacing is pretty quick, and also it's a slow burn. Like, a lot of the big action or the exciting parts happened in the last 25% of the book, and then like the last or second to last scene, things really ramp up when the real antagonist of the book, the king, shows up. And the book ends on a cliffhanger, and I'm assuming a sequel's coming out soon, and I'll probably read that because I am like curious enough as to where this is gonna go that I will probably read and review that next book. I will say that looking back on it, I don't think that this is a completed story. The beginning, the setup is really quick. The ending is a cliffhanger and it's not complete. And the middle is kind of nothing. Okay, let's move on to context, which is what is this world and who has the power? Like I said earlier in this review, this blend of vibes just doesn't work for me. And I think that it makes the world building or the world kind of confusing as well. Because of the like fairy tale, Eurocentric fantasy sort of setting, I imagine the world to be sort of medieval looking. Feels more contemporary. It gives sort of like a modern vibe. And I guess it's a little like the movie Onward, but no, not even. It's almost like that show Disenchanted, but I think they also pull off that blend better. The world building, the authors kind of like created fantasy, magic alternatives to like office equipment and just stuff you'd find around like in a workplace, I guess. They call coffee cauldron brew, and it's this magical drink that's made from magic beans. And they just kind of describe donuts as these like fried ring pastries. And I don't really remember. I think pixies copy things. There's like magic ink that copies things, that kind of thing. That would be fine. But also because it's this like new adult, so it's young adult, but you can swear. They say fuck a lot, and they also use the word adrenaline, and it just kept throwing me off. I'm like, so you won't say coffee, but you'll say fuck and you'll say adrenaline, and that sort of like doesn't work for me. You know, it's inconsistent and it's kind of clunky in my mind. And anytime I review fantasy, which I think is like every book I've reviewed, I talk about the magic system or the power system a little bit, and I didn't notice anything like. Nothing really jumped out at me as far as like contradictions or inconsistencies. It kind of made sense. Like it wasn't really well explained. You know, like at one point there's a dagger that's alive or sentient, near sentient, and it's imbued with magic. But also people have magic. I was just like, well, how does that work? But it wasn't explained, and I don't really know if it needed to because the magic is sort of incidental to the main thing, which is Evie wants to fuck her boss. I would have appreciated a little bit more conversation around like magic and these magical creatures and how those affect the society or how magic functions in the society. Also, I would have loved to know how this society functions because that was not touched on really at all, other than I guess capitalism is a thing and y'all gotta work and money's important, but you know, other than that, I don't really know much. Also, I don't know where things are. Like maybe if I'd bought a physical copy, I would have gotten a map or something, but I just like in the book, I didn't get a sense of like distance from things like the village where Evie lives versus where the king lives and all that stuff. You know, in the Gilded Ones, I don't know if you've read that book, but if you have, the Gilded Ones, I think gives a really good sense of the scope of the world and where things are. And it just, you kind of don't need to read a map in order to figure out where things are, get a feel for the layout of this world. And we don't get any of that in Assistant to the Villain. So I guess bottom line, there isn't a lot of rich, in-depth, well thought out world building going on in this book, but I didn't expect there to be, so I'm not necessarily disappointed. But okay, moving on to craft. I don't know, the writing is like so aggressively okay. I don't really have anything to say about it. I didn't find it like clunky or clumsy. This book doesn't even try to be poetic or atmospheric, and maybe that's for the best. There's almost nothing to say about the writing style other than that it's bland. There is like no flavor. It's about as seasoned as my white friend's chicken breast at a kickback, you know what I'm saying? And real quick, I'm gonna get into a fifth C, comedy. I can tell that this book is really funny to the right crowd. I didn't find any of this funny, and I think the main joke was beaten to death. And I don't think that there's really any solid sense of like comedic timing within the book, you know what I'm saying? But I know a joke when I read one. And because this book was allegedly born from like a series of comedic skits on TikTok, it makes sense that it would kind of try to stay focused on the lighthearted, goofy nature of the book and try to be this like literary rom-com type of deal and not really bother to be of any deep substance. So a lot of the heavy themes and serious conversations that could have been had were pushed past for the sake of the joke. And I honestly think that's too bad because, you know, if you were able to like handle the comedy and have these serious discussions, you'd have like a world-class piece of art on your hands. And I don't think that this is that. Also, I'm just remembering now that I did not touch the romance between the two main characters. And that's because not much there. Like they both just think each other is hot, and then near the end they're like, I love you, and that's the end of it. Boring. So was it good? Not really. Did I enjoy it though? Honestly, I enjoyed it more than I enjoyed Lightlark or Fourth Wing, which I know isn't really saying anything, but of those kind of books, this is the best one so far. I think this would have been better as like a show or a movie or something. I still wouldn't like it, but I think it just, the blending of vibes would have fit that medium a little bit better. And would I recommend it? Like if you really enjoy those sort of low budget, straight to streaming rom-com movies, then yeah, I think this might be your thing. All right, that's enough. Thank you so much for watching this video, especially if you made it to the end. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. If you're new to this channel, please subscribe. And thank you to every one of my subscribers. Thank you for 1K. I know a lot of people say it's not like a big accomplishment, but I'm really excited about it. I know that I was talking about doing a review with my wife, like a couples review video, and we're going to do that. We've picked the books that we're going to give each other to read. My wife is finishing up a book before she gets to work on that, and then I will start after she does because I read quicker than she does because I have more time to read than she does. Yeah, so we're working on that. Thank you so much. And if you'd like to support me, support what I do, what I'm trying to do with this channel, you can tip me or buy me a coffee. And if you want to support this channel on a regular basis and gain access to exclusive content you won't find anywhere else, make sure you consider subscribing to my Patreon. The other day, or like a couple of days ago, I was talking to some of my patrons in my private Discord server. And so they kind of told me a little bit about what they wanted. And so I'll be doing like kind of like extended editions of these reviews, or like a separate spoilery review where I do a deeper dive and kind of go even deeper into my thoughts on these books that I'm reviewing. And you'll get my Shadow and Bone reaction series, and once we're done with Shadow and Bone, you can help me pick the next thing that I'll react to. Plus, you gain access to my private Discord server, and there's a few of us in there right now. We're laying the foundation for this community, but we've had a lot of fun talking about books, anime, food, music, all kinds of stuff. You know, my boy Sonny has been talking D&D in there. I don't play D&D, so I'm not really a part of that conversation, but it's still really fun, and we would love to have you a part of it. So make sure you consider subscribing to my Patreon. I think that's everything. So thanks again so much for watching. My name is D. Don't fret. I'll see you next time. Peace out.